Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back with you on this beautiful Saturday morning, the 30th of May, 2026. Today is the day that the Lord has made. Jesus Christ. It's the day of the UEFA Champions League final, and we'll be digesting a little furthermore, not so much of what the tactics may be or the analysis of it, but more importantly, the moment, the feel of the moment. Both teams seeking to write their own history in the competition. The question is, who will want it bad enough? I was reflecting on some of my words and this idea that one team will want it more. That could be true, but it's the case of 51-49 that the margin is that small. The margin is that small in terms of who may want it the most. So it's not a full-blown conclusion that one wants it more than the other, but one where you sort of look at it and think, oh, maybe, just maybe, that extra motivation is what one may need to sort of separate the two sides in a way, one or the other. Okay, Jesus Christ. Anyways, okay. It's I'm trying to think of the right words to say in this moment, because it's everything. I know what fans feel this morning. You're beaming with excitement, but you're also having to live with anxiety in equal measure, in one way or the other. So there's that sort of feeling in the crowd. It's sort of, in a way, people are thinking about this moment. Last night, I was glad and privy to be part of another fruitful conversation that further dissected the game. And it's interesting how you interact with multiple people from different spheres in terms of the appreciation of the game itself, and people that try to analyze the game in one way or the other, that give you sort of different insights about the game that remind you that there's more than one aspect, that maybe there's something that you may have left out, that there's an element you may have not looked at in a way, and it's all supposed to pay off. Is it Sayo? Oh, let me read your name the correct way. Please excuse me on that one there. But for those of you that are just joining us, welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is my name. I come to you live from Kampala, Uganda, where it's 33 minutes past the hour at 10 a.m. It's a pleasure to have you on the broadcast. Let me know where you're joining us from. What team do you support? Are you a football fan, if anything? Are you looking forward to the UEFA Champions League final? What team are you going to be rooting for in the final? Let me know what your feelings are about that in as far as today is concerned. And I'll be reading each and every one of your comments. So Sayo says, hi, hello Sayo, where are you joining us from? Good morning. I hope you're doing okay. I'd forgotten one thing. You'll allow me have my audios tested just to make sure everything checks out, because more often than not, I have burnt my fingers before when it comes to our audios. So indulge me on this one as we go through it, because it's a necessary ritual that we have to undertake when it comes to, having our audios tested. But I think we are good to go. From what I'm witnessing on my end of the things. I hope that's the case with you guys. But also, I want to say thank you so much to all of those that were part of last night's conversation. Thank you so much for having been part of the discussion. You made it worthwhile for me. We're on here for close on to 2 hours. So thank you so much for always choosing to be part of these conversations. So like I said, according to Luis Enrique's perspective, the UEFA Champions League final is a case of one team beaming with confidence having won their first major league title, their first league title in 22 years. On the other hand, you have a team that has the experience. And it's very, very interesting to be in this sort of space where where you get to appreciate both sides for what they bring onto the table. Imagine what it would feel like, what the mood would be like amongst the Arsenal fans, but more importantly, amongst those Arsenal players, had they missed out on the Premier League title. I'd want to think that as much as they would have told themselves to carry on with a certain level of positivity and optimism, losing a Premier League title would have been more detrimental to them going into this fixture than it is the motivation that they have right now going into the semi-final. So, final. So there's all that. So I think that's the sort of space they will be at. FYBL long way says what? Okay, hi, long way. Anyways, for those of you that have just joined us, kindly like the podcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel, please, and help support us continue to grow. But the point I'm trying to drive at is that, according to Luis Enrique, it's a case of experience versus confidence. And it is right to state it that way because PSG, this is going to be their third UEFA Champions League final, stated just as much, having lost out to the 2020 final where they lost to Bayern Munich by 0-0. Fast forward, they won last year quite perfectly well. And they won by 5-0 against Inter Milan, and now they get to play their third final. Whereas on the other side, Arsenal get to play only their second final in their 140-year history. It's almost unthinkable to think of it that way. That for a club this stature, for a club that big, that they've never won it, and it's not to say that you cannot go further deep down and dissect what the rationale could have been, or whatever the case may have been. But the one thing you ought to think about is, I think I might need an interpreter. That's a long way. Why do you need an interpreter? That going into dissecting that may not matter that much. What matters is that the statement in its simplicity that they've never won it. And they're looking to write that history. The same way PSG were looking to write that history last season, and they did it. And with PSG now, their desperation is to write even better history. And I'll tell you what history that is. United Road 10, good morning. Good to have you back. You say, in the back of their heads, they know bid finishes to Manchester City, to the Premier League, and that they had very easy route to the UEFA Champions League final. They are going to be of low confidence and low block tonight. And that is where I disagree with a lot of people. This idea of Arsenal took the easy route to the Champions League final. I understand that when you draw comparisons to the route that PSG took and some of the opponents that they met along the way, it's understandable to know that, yeah, they had to beat six-time champions in Liverpool. They had to knock out another six-time champion in Bayern Munich and to get where they are. But let's not forget, it's not like you get to pick and choose who you play and who you do not play. If the case were that simple, Manchester City would have avoided Real Madrid at the round of 16. But you get what the draw gives you. But also, essentially, on the route that Arsenal took, that's the same route that had five-time champions in Barcelona, So how come it is not Barcelona here and it's Arsenal? So the point I'm trying to make, they are in the final because they deserve to be there in the final. Beyond just being unbeaten, they topped the league phase of the league phase of the UEFA Champions League. And during the course of that, they beat the German champions in Bayern Munich, the same side that PSG knocked out to get here. They beat Inter Milan, the champions of Italy, who won the double, including the Coppa Italia. You're talking about the side that, because Atletico de Madrid eventually finished fourth in the Spanish La Liga, they beat them in the league phase, and then they also beat them in the semi-finals to get here. So for people that want to paint this picture of simplicity, I just don't buy it. I don't buy it because I understand you trying to make the comparison, but when you simplify it to say, oh, they got an easier route. No, we're talking about a team who, in the last 2 UEFA Champions League season, have beaten up against PSG by 2-0. That was in the league phase last season. They beaten up against Real Madrid by they beat Real Madrid. That was in the quarterfinals last season. So, I mean, it's not a coincidence. It's not a sheer a spark of luck that they are here. It's a combination of luck and hard work that they find themselves here. You know, I'd want to think that they've worked hard enough and well enough for this moment, you know. So we cannot hold it against them, what route they've taken, you know. And again, I could say PSG. So does it suffice if I sit here and I say PSG have had an easier season than Arsenal? No, because you can only play the hand that you've been dealt with. Unfortunately, it's something I constantly said about Michael Carrick when Manchester United only had to play in the Premier League and they were winning their games. And I said, unfortunately, he can only play the hand he's been dealt with. We cannot critique him on his team not being in other competitions if by the time he took the mantle of it, it was not in those other competitions. So basically, for Arsenal, and by the way, that route that is claimed is easy, you earn it by virtue of where you also finish, in a way, you know. So if you've seen that during the knockout phases, they've ended their fixtures at home. It's not because it was designed to favor Arsenal. It's because they worked for it to be that way, because the rules were changed. That where you finish at the league phase will determine how you go about the knockout phases, you know, where you start away from home and wrap it at home. It gives you a certain bit of advantage, you know, and that's just about it. Okay, finished. Okay, football is very popular these days. That is Buck Rogers. Yeah, I don't think it's just popular these days. I think football has always been a popular sport. It may not be popular in every sphere of the world, but it is popular in majority of spheres of the world. What do I mean? When you go to the United States, other sporting disciplines are more popular than football. That I can appreciate for an absolute fact. For example, the NFL, basketball, that's NBA, they could be more popular than football. But when you go to places like Italy, when you go places to like the UK or England in particular, football is more popular. I would want to think the same thing about Spain. When you go to India, cricket is more popular. Bangladesh, Pakistan, cricket is more popular. West Indies, those sorts of places. When you go to South Africa, rugby is as popular as football. I'd want to think the Springboks of South Africa. And of course, their cricket side just as much. When you go to places like I think when you go to Egypt, you'll find that football is more popular. So I have an appreciation of that as well. They know that they beat a finished Manchester City. What do you mean they beat a finished Manchester City? Because when you say they beat a finished Manchester City, what's that supposed to mean? Beating Manchester City to the Premier League title by a margin of 7 points? Is that what you call a finished Manchester City? The finished Manchester City is the Manchester City that you're saying that by the end of match day 33, all teams having played the same number of games were at the summit of the Premier League table or more on better goals or more goals scored as compared to Arsenal. Is that the finished Manchester City that you're talking about? Are you talking about the Manchester City that has had a financial outlay of nearly £500 million over the last 4 transfer windows? When you go back to January 2025, bringing in Kushanov, Omar Mamush, Victor Reus, and Nico Gonzalez, preceded by summer, where they brought in Tijani Reinders, Ryan Cheki, Gianluigi Donnarumma, James Trafford, then that other goalkeeper from Chelsea. Is that as well as Ryan Atnori? Is that the Manchester City you're talking about? Are you talking about the finished Manchester City who had injuries midway the season and decided to go to Crystal Palace and bring in McKay to bolster their defense and went and brought in Antoine Semenyo to bolster the attack? Is that the finished Manchester City that you're talking about? I don't look at it that way. First of all, out of the last 4 Premier League seasons, I think Arsenal have challenged Liverpool and Man City the better or the most of any other side. It's the reason as why they've come second for 3 consecutive seasons, because I take you back to the time when Mikel Arteta just walks into Arsenal. It was evident for the world to see that Manchester City and Liverpool were the teams to chase, were the teams to beat. That if you wanted to win the league title, you had to, first of all, break into a space where you can be in the same sentence with them in terms of level of competitiveness. And he got there, he got there. And in getting there, he's managed to then beat Manchester City to it, So I do not think it is that simple. You're talking about a Manchester City who you claim are finished. They beat Arsenal in the Carabao Cup final. They beat Chelsea in the FA Cup final. They are domestic double winners. So I do not want to think it's a finished Manchester City. I appreciate the idea and the fact that Manchester City are a team in transition. But let's forget not that the same Manchester City had more Premier League title winning experienced players than Arsenal had on the other side of the aisle. You look at Nico O'Reilly, you look at Ruben Diaz, you look at Joshko Vadiol, you look at Jeremy Doku, you look at Brad Erling Haaland, you look at Rodrigo Hernandez Cascante, you look at Bernardo Silva, you look at Phil Foden. These are all players that have been there around. You look at Mateo Kovacic, regardless of how many minutes he's managed to play this season. You look at Matthias Fernandes. We're talking about all players that have been available at least once or more than once when Manchester City were lifting the Premier League title. So again, I appreciate all the different factors, but for anybody to try and paint the picture or that somehow it's been easy for Arsenal or otherwise, I just don't get it. Like I said, if you disabuse any bias that you may have about Arsenal and you appreciate it for the competitiveness of what it was, that they came out on top eventually, you'll appreciate football a bit more. As opposed to, let me give you this simple task. Find reasons, positive reasons, as to why they won, as opposed to trying to look for negative reasons that you think helped them win. That's the simplicity of it. Okay, let me get to more of your comments at United Road 10. You say, 1 game a week was bad for us. Often we were rusty in first half after having not played for a long time. I mean, Manchester United is the only team that I've witnessed in the Premier League this season. Okay, not the only one. Maybe I think even Bournemouth at one point. Only a handful of teams, but they had literally an entire preseason of rest. Just imagine any of the Premier League title chasing sides had the opportunity to have that. 23 days without kicking a game of football. And that was, I think they played like on a Friday. Then we went into the March international break. And immediately after the March international break, the first weekend was for the FA Cup games. And they ended up playing the subsequent week on Monday. I mean, they had all that time to themselves. They even had time to go and do a camp in Ireland, So they benefited from that. Really, clubs like Crystal Palace were having a grueling fixture, having to play on Thursday nights and return to the Premier League and stay competitive, and end up the season with a piece of silverware. Manchester United were being well rested. Trust me, that bit of rest that Man United had, give it to Pep Guardiola. He will be smiling. Give it to Mikel Arteta. He will be smiling. Why? Because the amount of time it would have given his side to recuperate and go again for the subsequent set of fixtures would have been invaluable. It's only United, as one of the teams that finished within the top 5, actually you could extend it in the top 5, that had the luxury of that. All the others did not have. Liverpool had the Champions League. They may not have reached the finals of these competitions, but they went as far as the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. You know, same cannot be said for Manchester United. You know, so but anyway, it's not largely the comparison of who had it easier and who had it harder. You just have to appreciate it for what it was. Okay. Hmm. Okay. United Road, you say bad recruitment. Semenyo and Gehi was the cherry on top. You say bad recruitment. Semenyo and Gehi were the cherry on top. Now, the thing about player recruitment, I've said this just as much, and United Road, I'm going to use examples within the realms of Manchester United to paint for you this picture. Transfers are a gamble. You take a bet on certain players that they will come out, that they will work out. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. When Manchester United were bringing in Lenny Euro, they thought, oh, we're getting ourselves a young prime starter. Has his start to Manchester United career been perfect? No. I think I'm right to say it's not yet worked out. I'm not saying it's not going to work out, but so far, for 2 seasons now, I do not think you put it on table and say, yeah, this has been a perfect signing. In fact, we can only wish we had done it sooner. Look at Jadon Sancho. When you signed Jadon Sancho, was it 2021 from Borussia Dortmund? He was literally at the peak of his game. What's happened since then? You know, look at Manuel Ugarte coming in from PSG. Has he been the signing that you hoped that you signed? No, he's not been that. You know, if I were to draw comparisons, I'd say Aiden Heaven, who you signed in January, that is January 2025 from Arsenal, has looked better in a Manchester United jersey than Manuel Ugarte has looked. You know, look at Joshua Zirkzee coming in from Bologna. You know, he was good. Look at Rasmus Højlund. You know, have they all worked out? No. So with transfers, you can spend as much money as you can, but it's always a gamble. You take a bet on yourself that I have identified a good player that I think suits my system, and that it will work out perfectly well. But sometimes it just doesn't. So the same way Man City may have burnt their fingers with some transfers, it's the same way other clubs do burn their fingers. And I look at a player like Tijani Reinders at Manchester City. I do not think it's a lack of quality that he's been out of that team. At the start of the season, he was in that team quite regularly and was really, really good, in my humble opinion. But somehow, somewhere, in Pep Guardiola and his own assessment of his team, he felt that maybe the team lacked the perfect balance every time he played alongside maybe a Nico Gonzalez or something, and he decided to drop him. At the tail end of the season, he brings him in. Manchester City, with the ingenuity of Pep Guardiola and his overall brilliant squad management and rotation, you had him at the tail end of the season bringing on a very fresh Omar Mamouche, and he was making things happen. How many times was Phil Foden out of that team? You know, so there's quite a number of factors. Okay, you say, but fine, you can only beat what's in front of you. Exactly. You can only beat what's in front of you. And going into today's final, it's now PSG in front of Arsenal and vice versa, you know. So I cannot, I remember, let me use this example. I remember last season when Chelsea fans were bragging about, you know, their title-winning season, particularly because they had won the UEFA Conference League. And their criticism was that teams like Arsenal, teams like Manchester United had not won anything. And I was thinking to myself, come on, guys. First of all, congratulations, you won a piece of silverware, well deserved. But you cannot accuse Arsenal or Manchester United for not winning a piece of silverware simply because you won the Conference League and they were not in the same competition. It's like me saying, why did Chelsea win the UEFA Champions League last season? Because they were not in it. So neither Arsenal nor Manchester United could have won the Conference League because they were not there in the first place. And by the way, I do not think, in the grand scheme of things and in the broader perspective of things, every time you find your team competing in the Conference League, it's a sign of fall off. It's a sign that you found yourself pushed out of the 2 top tier competitions of UEFA. That's how you end up in the Conference League. So the question would be, would you rather compete in the UEFA Champions League or be winning the UEFA Conference League season in, season out? So if you're a Chelsea fan, if you're a Manchester United fan, if you're an Arsenal fan or a Liverpool fan, or by extension, Barcelona or otherwise, ask yourself that question. Would you rather be competing season in, season out in the UEFA Champions League, regardless of whether you're competing there, but you're not winning it for, let's say, for 5 consecutive years? Would you swap that for winning the UEFA Conference League for 5 consecutive years? Really? You'd still be writing history of being a winning team, that you're picking all these pieces of silverware. But the grade of these pieces of silverware matters. I'll make an argument to say one UEFA Champions League trophy could weigh worth more than 5 UEFA Conference Leagues. That's how I'll put it. I don't want to think it's controversial to say it that way, but I would want to think that it suffice. It would pass the filter to say that. Okay, PSG are going to play very high and dominate the ball and not allow you corners and set pieces. I think they'll do anything to, of course, any opponent that you're up against will work to try and counter whatever your positives are. Even Arsenal will be looking to do that. I'll give you an example. PSG are very good at this counter-pressing football. Imagine if Arsenal decide to take a page out of Manchester United's playbook and say, we'll let you have the ball as much as you want. Have your ball. What we're going to do is simply be the ones countering you in terms of counter-pressing. But in doing that, we're not going to be overly committal because we know that the moment we commit into the counter-press and leave ourselves open, you're going to sort of exploit that space. In other words, the rest defense area that is the distance between David Villa and his backline should be shorter as opposed to it being so wide. And then the rest midfield area should also be shorter. In other words, midfielders closer to defenders and defenders closer to their goalkeeper, So if Arsenal were to take out that playbook and PSG would have majority of the ball, they know how to use it. But they thrive more when you have the ball and they have to counter-press you and nick the ball off of you and go on those quick transitions. So because when you have the ball, you are more likely to commit yourself into attacking them. So I do not know what sort of playbook they're going to pull out. I don't know what Mikel Arteta is going to pull out, but there's many ways to go about it. And I would want to think that all managers are trying to think in every possible aspect of how to beat one another. If you're PSG, you're thinking we need to avoid set pieces as much as possible, whereas we have a capable goalkeeper who can come and collect those balls that are being floated in. Prevention is better than cure. That's just about it. Okay. 23 days without a game was horrible. Leeds killed us. It looked like we were in off-season and Leeds were in season in the first half. A good assessment on that one. True, but sometimes it's clear it is a bad signing as Semenyo has never passed the eye test. Now, you see, I've said this before without any fear of contradiction, that towards the tail end of Pep Guardiola's tenure at Manchester City, sometimes it's felt like he signed players that ordinarily are not typical Pep Guardiola players. But I also understand that he has an appreciation of the evolution of the game for him to identify players that to know that where the game was 5-7 years ago may not be the same place the game is in this last 2-3 years. So he needs maybe a different breed and sort of quality and crop of players. So I appreciated it in that sense because, I mean, when you look at Jeremy Doku, when you look at Antoine Semenyo, I do not know. For some reason, I just do not see them as typical Pep Guardiola sort of players, So I have that bit about it. But it is what it is. I could be wrong in one or the other. So indulge me on that one. Okay, you say our playbook, no ways we're not as low block as you guys. No, when I say the United playbook, I do not mean sitting in a low block, and by the way, United have played low blocks before. I've seen it, United thrive more when they do not have majority of the ball. Their games that they've won really dominating possession. I've seen that. But oftentimes, they are happy to let you have the ball. You attack them, then when they steal that ball, they go in the quick counter, the quick transitions. That's their emoji. So that's the inference I was making about, not particularly, United behaving like a Brentford, that they're just going to sit back, and then wait for them to be attacked. That's not particularly what I meant. I hope that clarifies it. Okay. The entry of 9 English teams into European competitions next season is suggesting that the Premier League is the toughest league in the world of football. PSG gone through hell. Yeah, like I said, I do appreciate the sort of journey that PSG have gone through, and in quite sharp similarity to where the sort of route they took last season. It's not different from this season, because even this season they've had to play the playoffs, because they lost 2 games in the league phase to Bayern Munich and to Sporting CP during the league phase. So consequently, they ended up finishing outside the top 8, and they had to play Monaco in the playoffs. But if you watch those 2 legs over Monaco, had it not been the 2 red cards for Monaco, maybe we would be having a different conversation altogether, that maybe PSG by now would be out. But I mean, we cannot keep it in ifs and whatnots. So they're the team here. They've had a tough route to getting here. But one of the reasons as to why they've had it tough is because of the route they took, like I said, by virtue of finishing outside the top 8 in a way. Then at the round of 16, they come up against Chelsea. And now, I don't know. You guys tell me, by measure of the fact that Chelsea have finished 10th on the Premier League log, does that pass for a tough route? Their own pedigree precedes them in the UEFA Champions League, that they've won it twice. They played 3 finals of the UEFA Champions League. I stand to be corrected if it is otherwise, but to the best of my recollection is 2008, 2012, and 2021. So they've won 2 of them. So they have that pedigree in as far as European competitions are concerned. But in as far as this season has been, Chelsea have not been good enough. So I could make that argument that as tough an opponent Chelsea is at this UEFA Champions League stage, this season overall, they've not been good enough, but that's the team they played in the round of 16. When it came to the quarterfinals, they played Liverpool. Liverpool have the pedigree, and it's there for the world to know in as far as the UEFA Champions League is concerned. But again, in the grand scheme of things, look at how Liverpool have competed this season. Have they really, really competed well? By any measure, was this Liverpool side half as good as what they were last season? I do not think so, because when you look at the Premier League table, they finished 5th, 24 points adrift of where they finished last season when they were winning the league title. When you look at the UEFA Champions League, they only lost 1 game in the league phase last season, and that was against PSV Eindhoven, I think in the final day, because they had already gone through. And when you go back to their games against PSG, they won away by 1-0 in Parc des Princes. This time around, they went and got beat by 2-0. In the reverse fixture, they lost by a similar scoreline, 1-0 before the game went to penalties. This time around, they came to Anfield, dominated the game. PSG sat back in a low block and defended really, really well for almost 70 minutes, caught them on the counter-attack, and scored 2 goals in around the 70th minute and at the tail end of the game. So, I could also make that argument that the Liverpool side they faced this season were not as good, but no less, they're still Liverpool. They still carry that respect, that pedigree with them. Same applies for Chelsea, So there's that. Then at the semi-finals, they faced off with Bayern Munich. We saw how the first leg went. They went toe-to-toe with each other, and it ended 5-4 in favor of PSG. Fast forward, we got to the reverse fixture, and Luis Enrique, more than anybody else, he knows that I cannot play the same kind of game that I played at Parc des Princes in front of my home crowd when I go away to the Allianz Arena. What did he do? He changed tactics. And you saw how Matevi Safanov was booting that ball outside of the area, outside of the play field, so that Bayern Munich would get a throw in, and in the throw in, trying to attempt to find Michael Olise, the crowd out Michael Olise, steal the ball and go on their quick transition. You saw how they played in a protective manner to Warren Zaire-Emery, who was playing at right back because of the absence of Achraf Hakimi. You saw the rotations with Fabian Ruiz finding himself at left back if Nuno Mendes had been absent. So they're that team that is really, really good. So even them getting here, it's not by accident. There was better than Bayern Munich, so they're that good, so I appreciate the goodness in them, but it's not to say they took the most difficult route. Look at how close the tie was between Real Madrid and Bayern Munich until that red card to Eduardo Camavinga, before that reverse fixture sort of flipped on its head. So there's quite a number of things there that we can talk about in that regard or respect. Okay, that's true, but that was their downfall. They basically changed their philosophy. Fair enough. Again, by the way, Konate is going to Real Madrid. I think I've seen news. It seems so. Some Liverpool fans are pissed. Now, from what I understand of the situation, I do not know whether it's with absolute certainty that Ibrahim Konate is going to go to Real Madrid. I know for a fact that Real Madrid have held some strong interest in Ibrahim Konate before, but because when you assess his overall season, this campaign is not gone to perfection, or it's not gone as had been planned. It's not gone well. He's sort of struggled through this season, and that's how Real Madrid could down their interest at some point, I think around January. So contract talks with Liverpool had stalled at some point, and then they got resumed. When they got resumed, they were close to reaching an agreement. But suddenly, somehow, I think Liverpool developed cold feet. I do not know, or they changed their minds. If you remember, the situation that happened between Manchester United and David De Gea Quintana was that Man United had offered David De Gea a contract, but then last minute they pulled the rug, or they pulled it from under his feet, and suddenly they let him go. So I think that's what has happened here with Ibrahim Konate. I do not think the player has tried to be too greedy or too selfish in this particular case. I think it's Liverpool more having a change of heart, or trying to revise their terms and conditions that is sort of led to this situation, and he's going to leave the club as a free agent. First of all, good for him. Why? He's going to get a huge sign-on fee wherever he lands. I do not know if he'll get an opportunity at a team as big as Liverpool. If it is not Real Madrid, the jury is still out there for him. He's a good defender. Is he in the same space with Virgil van Dijk, Gabriel Magalhaes, William Saliba, maybe Marquinhos, that sort of bracket? I do not think so. But nonetheless, he's a good defender. So whatever the journey leads for him, we'll wait to find out. But for now, it appears that Real Madrid are staying quiet about this one. Okay, let me see. Hi, Adash. Good to have you. You say hi, Snatcher. Today, if Timber plays, I think he will shut Kvaratskhelia down. That is Mohammed. Hi, Mohammed. Good to have you on the broadcast. Now, there's a possibility that happens. There's also a possibility that Jurriën Timber gets exposed for his lack of match sharpness, because he's not been playing football for quite some time, ever since he had to be forced off with that groin injury in Arsenal's grinded out 2-0 victory over Everton a couple of months ago. So, it could go either of two sides. It could be that he gets exposed and he gets done for that lack of sharpness and freshness. It could be that he comes and puts in a man of the match performance against Kvaratskhelia. So it's a hard one to slice, but I know that Kvaratskhelia is the kind of a player that will give any defender, elite or otherwise, a very, very tough day in office. It's very hard to keep him quiet for 90 minutes, Okay, yes, true. He hasn't had a great season. Okay, you wish. Yeah, true, because he was making mistakes in goal. Yeah, he was making mistakes in goal. But by the way, I never thought at any one point that Andre Onana was an upgrade on David De Gea Quintana. Not not one bit for it. The one thing I simply appreciated is the idea of the manager wanting to play a certain way that did not suit David De Gea, especially when it came to the fact of building, a ball and progression of it. I remember when Unai Emery had just come to Arsenal and he wanted to play this a game where you start with the goalkeeper, and build the play from behind. And Peter Cech, great as he is, with all his primary pedigree, was struggling. And that's how they ended up bringing in Bernard Leno. So it's simply that. David De Gea was a very good shot stopper, good with his feet in serving games, hands, etc., etc. But when it comes to, let's build it from the back, that was never his thing. He's the goalkeepers of yesterday, Iker Casillas, Gigi Buffon, Peter Cech, Edwin van der Sar, Seaman, that sort of traditional goalkeeper. Now, Pep Guardiola decided to bring us this Victor Valdez of this world, Ederson Moraes, Santana, Alson Ramsey-Baker, the Rayas that we see present day, and you see, so there's that. And that's why, you see, even Manchester United have burnt their fingers before when they tried to build it from out of the back. I remember that goal they conceded against Liverpool, trying to play it out from the back. But you could see that there was a certain level of discomfort when it came to Sergio Lomans. It's something that he needs to practice more to build the ball from the back with his teammates. But Manchester United's strategy, and this started under Ruben Amorim, is that we're going to use our goalkeeper to play the long ball, and our towering striker on the other side, in Benjamin Sesko, is going to fight for that ball with the defender, regardless of who wins it. They're going to head it back in our direction, and we're going to look to win that second ball. And I would want to think it's a Casemiro, it's a Bruno Fernandes, it's a Kobe Mainu, or whoever occupies that space in the 10 or the 8 role that wins that ball, and then we sort of proceed further or do a slight holder play as our wing backs, come in quickly. So, and it's something that is really worked for them. Under Michael Carrick, it's not changed much. Again, you've seen so many long balls from Sergio Lomans going in the same direction, in that sort of usage. Okay. Hi, Raymond Kangumba says, hi, PSG, Arsenal winning the trophy for the Champions League trophy for the Arsenal. That's from Ray. Thank you so much, Raymond Kangumba. Good to hear from you this morning. United Road, you say, yes, true. Hi, Mitchell Wainscots. Pleasure to see you around. Thank you so much for tuning in. Mitchell Wainscots is a writer, also does, a branding in terms of T-shirts, caps, etc. Then Raymond said, hi, Abe Ezauzori and Nosa and Iwen Joquin and Jonathan David should sign for Newcastle. Let's hope it works out for you the way you hope for it to happen. So, anyways, let's go back to the conversation of it, the gist of it. Like I said, this game, now, in terms of history, PSG are looking to be the first team that wins the UEFA Champions League back to back after having won it for the very first time. I'm not talking about the entire history of the competition going back to the days of the UEFA Cup, because the European Cup, because when it was initiated many, many years ago, Real Madrid went on and won it 5 consecutive seasons. And then other teams, I think in the 60s there, I think it was 61, 62, when Benfica won it twice in a row. But in terms of when you take yourself back to, is it 92, from 92 or 93, when it becomes the UEFA Champions League, there's no team winning it for the first time that has won it back to back. And also, you'll find very few teams that have won it back to back, if any. Apart from Real Madrid in 2016, 17, and 18, what other team has done it? Even the great Bayern Munich of 2010 up to 2016 did not do it, because they played the final in 2010, got beat by Inter Milan, missed out on the final in 2011, came back in 2013, won it, beating Borussia Dortmund. 2014, they were not there. 16, 17, All those were semi-final finishes with Pep Guardiola. So which other team, even the mighty Barcelona under Pep Guardiola, they won it 2009, missed out on it 2010 because Inter Milan knocked them out at the semi-finals, came back and won it 2011, 2012, they could only make it to the semi-finals, got knocked out by Chelsea, who are the eventual champions. When Chelsea first won it in 2012, the next time of winning it was in 2021. So you can see the, 11 years in between. And then when they first make it to the final in 2008, it took them 4 years to return to the final. So I stand to be corrected if otherwise that there's been any team that has won this trophy back to back other than Real Madrid in this Champions League era, and any a first-time winner. So PSG are looking to write that sort of history, to be a first-time winner and win it back to back. First of all, they have achieved the idea of being a first-time winner, and the subsequent season you return to the Champions League final. Even when you got back to the mighty Manchester City, they were in the finals in 2021, lost to Chelsea, did not make it in the finals of 2022, and then came back in 2023 and won it. So there's that little bit of it. Yesterday, I was watching a clip by David Ornstein of The Athletic, and he was talking about this whole number 22 sort of thing. It had been 22 years since Arsenal last won the league title. Junior Ayo Junior Kropi shared 22, scored the goal against Manchester City that eventually leads the game to end in a 2-2 draw for Arsenal to win it. Victor Gyökeres has scored 21 goals across all competitions for the Arsenal, and that means he's 1 goal shy away from 22 this campaign. Then it's been 20 years since Arsenal made it to the final, and this is their second Champions League final in history. So in a way, there's a double two in there. I mean, these 2 and 2s, but that's the sort of myth about it. So this experience with Luis Enrique, experience within that squad, and I wanted to think about it this way. Which of the 2 teams is going to be under more pressure? And I realized the pressure is going to be shared in equal margin, even though I think slightly Arsenal may be under a bit more pressure. Why? PSG, having been at this stage last year and won it, they know the feel of the moment. They know the noise from the crowd. They know the deafening noise from the opposing fans. They understand the stage, this grand occasion. They understand it because they've been there before. And the beauty for them is that it's not been so many years apart that they've been at this stage, because some of those players, like Marquinhos, was there in 2020 when they were losing to Bayern Munich. So there's that appreciation, and this second final, third final for them coming in quick succession is a good thing. In as far as the Arsenal are concerned, they do not have a single player whatsoever that was there in 2006 when they made it to the finals. No. What they do have is a player in Kai Havertz who played and scored in the 2021 Champions League final. So that's the only experienced player in as far as the UEFA Champions League stage is concerned, goes for them. So there's that. Then in the idea of Arsenal having a bit more pressure as compared to PSG lays in the fact that Arsenal have never won it, so they're looking to write that history. The confidence with which they carry themselves into this game is the idea of being very good, of being very solid defensively, of being unbeaten in the competition thus far, but also coming here as Premier League champions. Like I said at the start of this conversation, just try for 1 second and imagine if Arsenal had come to this stage or arrived to this stage after squandering the Premier League title. I think the mood would be much, much different. They would be even more nervous. They would be even less confident coming into this final. But that triumph of the Premier League gives them a certain level of confidence and feel-good factor about themselves. For PSG, winning the French League One title, I don't think that's news. I don't think that's a confidence booster. Why? If you've won it 12 times out of the last 14 years, it's a routine. Because only Lille and Monaco have sort of managed to dethrone PSG in the last 14 years. It's become the French League One trophy has become a household item just as much as salt in the cupboards of PSG. So there's that. So I do not think that's their confidence booster. But one of the other things that is also going for PSG beyond their experience and etc is that their players have largely been well rested across the season. Of course, some of it is due to injuries. You remember last season, having wrapped up the season in high spirits, winning the UEFA Champions League, they quickly went and played at the new expanded edition of the FIFA Club World Cup, and they made it to as far as the final. So definitely their start of the season was bound to be difficult because those players needed a bit of a rest. And there's a reason as why Ousmane Dembele has only played one game, where he's played an entire 90 minutes. And in the French League One, where he played about 20 games or so, he only started 9 of them. So that sort of level of freshness, when you look at Fabian Ruiz, for majority of the season, he was absent through injury, and it was Warren Zaire-Emery playing in that role. So that bit of freshness, you're not going to match it. So there's that. However, on the other side, because at the tail end of the season, because Arsenal won the Premier League title on Tuesday when Manchester City failed to beat FC Bournemouth, it sort of lifted so much weight off of their shoulders. They went into that bit of relaxed mode. They had a moment to take a sigh of relief, to breathe it in and appreciate the season for what it's been and for the roller coaster it's been, all its ups and downs. But more importantly, that bit of rest, going into rest period. Why? Because I think the circumstances would have been different if Arsenal needed to go all out with their outright best team to try and beat Crystal Palace on the final day of the season in trying to win the Premier League title. So that's why they had a very changed team. Kepa Arrizabalaga in goal. You had Christian Nogard on the pitch, Mosquera. I think you had, was it Carafiori on, or was it Nkapie? I'm trying to even remember what that squad looked like. But Gabriel Jesus was out there, so you sort of look at it and think to yourself, this is, you had Noni Madueke starting that game, why? Because they had already done it, and they could give majority of those star players or key starters a bit of a rest. Max Dorman started that game. Martinelli started that game. It was actually Hinkapie, Mosquera, and Carafiori in that back line. So that bit of rest period. And then, of course, these couple of days going into the final. Obviously, PSG concluded their season 2 weeks earlier, and therefore they've equally had a lot of time off and rest, a lot of time to work on their craft in terms of how they're going to counter this Arsenal side. And what remains are the nerves within the fans. Arsenal to have the Manchester City FA Cup 2023. Really? Arsenal to have the Manchester City FA Cup 2023 drunk final. March 2023 FA Cup final? I don't get that. Why? Because 2023 FA Cup final, that was Man City beating up against Manchester United in the FA Cup final by 2-1. So I do not get the correlation in this particular sense. But first of all, the first goal in this game is going to be really, really important. Who scores it and when they score it? Those two aspects are going to be very, very important. PSG have this thing that they do. They always look for what you say, oh, Manchester City versus Man United 2024, sorry. Okay. You're saying because Manchester City had but 2024, remember the 2024 Premier League title went to the final day of the season. I think Arsenal were winning against Everton, and Man City were beating up against, was it West Ham on the final day of the season? So it's not like it went to the wire. If Arsenal score fast, they can afford to just sit back and defend. Now, that's true, but also, I do not think that just because they do not score fast, they're just going to be on the front foot all day, because if you try to play that game of attack me, I attack you, PSG are better than you on that one. So I do not think they're going to play a game very different from what we've observed of them this season, where they play with a certain level of conservatism, with a certain level of caution. I think they're going to stay in that sort of headspace. So that's what I anticipate. So like I was saying, who scores the first goal and when they score it, it's going to be very critical in this game. PSG have this knack and idea of wanting to score that early goal. Even when you go back to the Champions League final last season, you remember they scored, I think, was it within 18 minutes? They had that first goal already. Why? Because they know it's a disruptor. That first goal is a disruptor. You remember when they went away to Chelsea at the round of 16, they looked for that quick early goal. It's a disruptor. So in the final, their first goal came in the 12th minute through Achraf Hakimi, and by the 20th minute, they had gotten the second. So they often look to score that early goal that sort of disrupts you. And if you let them do that, it's bound to be a long evening for you. And because sometimes the mistake that teams do is that when you concede an early goal against PSG, you almost feel desperate or have this idea sold in your head that you need to try and attack them as quickly as possible to restore parity. That's a huge mistake. The moment you do that, you're going to leave yourself open up to concede the second. That's what happened to Chelsea in the reverse fixture. And that's why those goals came quite quickly. Okay. JK says if Arsenal score fast, they can afford to just sit back and defend. That's true. JK, you say, but PSG defense is not as good as Arsenal. That's true, but PSG's defense is still good. Now, remember, PSG's defending is good, but it's better because they spend more time attacking you as opposed to you attacking them. But I've seen them sit back and defend against Liverpool at Anfield, that game that they won by 2-0. They dug in. And Marquinhos and Willian Pacho are good at digging in. They'll put in the blocks. Obviously, you may get a few shots here and there away, but they know how to defend really, really well. Nuno Mendes, 1v1 situations is good. Achraf Hakimi, good. So, but there's that space. Oftentimes when they go in their attack, there is always that space between the right back and the defender. Same applies for the left back. Although I've observed that in some cases, Nuno Mendes' mobility or ability to go forward has sort of been limited to shift them to some form of a back three, especially because Vitinha is always exploring further forward, as well as Joao Neves. So they sort of reserve Nuno Mendes' moves. And when he moves, he will tag into the midfield and stay within that sort of zone. But there's usually that space. And I hope Arsenal, with Leandro Trossard or whoever gets to play, look to exploit that space between Marquinhos and Achraf Hakimi. There's always that space that you can exploit. So yeah, Arsenal better defensively. They are the best team, or if not the very best, when it comes to a team, how they behave out of ball possession. They're really, really good. So they can play that compact game. You go back to last season, and I mean the 2024-2025 season. You remember when they had to grind out they had a 2-1 lead against Manchester City at the Etihad Stadium, and Leandro Trossard got that red card at the tail end of the first half, and they came back in the second half with a manless against Manchester City at the Etihad Stadium, and it took a late equalizer from John Stones. In other words, if they decide to sit back and maintain that discipline, they can do it. They can play that sort of game, They can look to catch you on the counter-attack if you overcommit. The team selection is also going to be critical to how the managers may think about this game, particularly for Mikel Arteta, because for Luis Enrique, I think the writing is on the wall. He will go with his usual team. However, even with his usual team, he has the ingenuity to craft out something a tactic that you may find sometimes even a bit odd. I remember I had not understood. At first, I thought, what's Matevi Safanov doing? Kicking the ball constantly outside or almost outside. And I was thinking, maybe he's just being off of it. But then the more you looked at it, the more intentionally it looked that he was constantly kicking that ball outside. And PSG had do that. For example, they'll want to concede, they'll want to win a throw-in, usually on their left flank. So when they win a throw-in on their left flank, they want to sort of play the kind of game where, because of the throw-in, they attract you in because you've come to do the counter press. And as soon as they find the tiniest bit of space, either William Pacho or Nuno Mendes in there is going to try and search for a dropping Ousmane Dembele in midfield. And they're very, very quick. And in that quickness, they're also very, very sharp or very, very clinical. So it always works to their advantage. So if you fall for that trap, if they're going to have a throw-in, let them have a crack at it. Commit a couple of 1 to 3 players around that zone. Just do not look to overcrowd it, because that's what they are looking to do. To draw you in. To draw you in. It's more like the idea of you throwing maize to a chicken when you want to grab it, you know. In other words, attract it to come and nibble on this maize that you've thrown to the ground and then snap and pick it up, you know. Okay, Lolo, Manchester City players were so drunk the weekend before the final. Grealish was out of it in the public. I mean, it happens, but let me tell you, excuse me, I don't think Man United simply won that final because Manchester City players were drunk. In other words, it wouldn't have just ended 2-1. So Man United had to work hard for it. And I do not think, even though it's been a sort of criticism or an assessment made that has been leveled against Arsenal or at Arsenal in regards to how they behaved in the last couple of days, there's this, somebody was trying to float a narrative that, oh, these guys have been partying all through and through ever since they won the Premier League title. They had their moment to party, but also, from what I gather, is that they've had 10 days of rigorous training in simply looking to the final. Remember, the Crystal Palace game, that one was, by the way, it was a ritual, a routine. You have to come to wrap up the season. I do not think they sat there and were obsessing about the tactics of that game. No. And for example, after Monday, in the aftermath of wrapping up the Premier League season, starting from Tuesday, it was business as usual, grinding it out, you know, rigorous training. So, for example, and somebody was trying to use the footage that they had seen of Arsenal training in that final training session that was televised. You know how it happens. You know how these things go. When the cameras are watching, players oftentimes train in a very relaxed manner. You think that is by coincidence? No, it's well choreographed. Go about your yoga, do these stretching drills and maybe long balls, or you're trying shooting practice. You'll do how is it called? This sort of warm up where you have somebody in the center and players are passing the ball amongst each other and somebody is trying to intercept the ball. Sometimes it will be 1 or 2 players in the middle of that octagon or square kind of thing. So it's sort of routine. They had their rigorous training, and also the final training session usually is a bit more relaxed as opposed to be very grim, because you don't want to tire those players. You want them to have a bit of relax, and going into the final. Rondos. Okay, so basically, so guys, what are your predictions for the Champions League final? Your honest predictions. What you think is going to play out, regardless of what the tactics will be. Yesterday, I did pose the question to ask some Arsenal fans in different fora that if you had to choose, imagine you are going to win the final. Who would you rather score for you that winning goal? Whether you're winning 1-0 or you're winning it 2-1, but that goal that wins you the title. And some people were saying Kai Havertz, others went for Gabriel Magalhaes, somebody went for William Saliba, somebody said Eberechi Eze, another one said Victor Gyökeres. Why? And when you find yourself in that bit of space, that is when you have your reminder that you have an appreciation for all players across board. Perhaps maybe not in equal measure, but when you pose that sort of question, you sort of take yourself to a space where you imagine how it would appear if any of those players scored. And I've said this before, sometimes in finals where margins are really, really thin and small, or you may get the most unlikely candidate scoring. You may get the most unlikely candidate scoring. A guy that has not been scoring goals throughout the entire season. I'll give you an example. Arsenal's Mikel Merino just returned from injury, and he played in that game against Crystal Palace. He could come in and he's the guy that scores you the winning goal, And you're thinking to yourself, really, of all players, out of all the hard work that we've seen, it's this guy that is snatched the moment. So yeah, some guys are good big game players. Yesterday we were having a discussion on who should start. Between Kai Havertz and Victor Gyökeres, somebody was saying, given how Victor Gyökeres has improved at the tail end of the season, the way he occupies defenders, the way he runs into these bit of spaces, start him. But we are also constantly reminded of how every time Kai Havertz is available and it's a big game, Mikel Arteta is always going to go for him. So we have to wait and see. Okay. Yeah, that's what it's called. I think PSG easy win, not just because I hate Arsenal. Okay. You're not the only one to suggest an easy win for PSG. I've seen Yaya Toure go 2-0 for PSG against Arsenal. I've seen Postco saying Arsenal going to get beat 3-0 or 4-0. And a couple of other people think that Arsenal going to get turned over, So I understand. The quality gap between the two teams is big, okay? Let's see if that will be exhibited across the 90 minutes or so. But when I take myself back to the two-leg semifinals, in which Arsenal did play both semifinals with that Gabriel Magalhaes because he was out through injury, and it was Jakub Kivio, and in which they played with Maz Luis Kelly at left back. The first leg they played without Thomas Partey. They did not have Kai Havertz for both legs. I think in the first leg it was Leandro Trossard who played as the striker, and then in the reverse fixture it was Mikel Merino. So I also have an appreciation that the team that was assembled against PSG the last time outing could be different from that that is assembled today, and maybe that makes Arsenal a bit slightly stronger than and gives them a bit of a competitive advantage than what they would have had the last time out. Okay, but I understand. It reminds me of Barcelona versus Manchester United at Wembley 2011. How could we forget? Because at some point the cameras showed us Sir Alex Ferguson, and he was shivering. He was shivering. At one point, Ryan Giggs was put into a triangle that involved, I think, Andres Iniesta, Xavi, and was it Busquets? I don't remember who the other was. He got tired of chasing and he decided to summon his teammates. Come on, guys, come and help out here. It's becoming harder and harder. So, and by the way, that Manchester United side was really, really strong, was really, really good. Sometimes you get it right, sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's just not your day. You see, the picture I do not want us to paint for people is that these sides are indomitable, because that good Barcelona side never went a season unbeaten, as good as they were. The same PSG has not gone a season unbeaten. So that means the teams that have beaten it. I've seen Monaco beat PSG in the league. I've seen Stade Rennes beat PSG in the league. I've seen Paris FC beat PSG in the league. So they're a very good team. They're a well-drilled team, a well-oiled machine. The head coach or manager in Luis Enrique, good. Possibly, tactically, one of the very best that there is currently. But they are not indomitable. They can get beat. And if you're an Arsenal fan out there looking for hope, maybe that's the hope you're looking for. That's the hope that you need. These guys are not indomitable, So anyways, for Arsenal, they're looking to write the history of winning it for the first time. Like I said, it's nerve-wracking. The anxiety is going to build up by the hour if you're an Arsenal fan out there. And it is what it is. It is what it is. You have to enjoy the moment for what it is. I do not know whether a lot of you guys will be relishing the moment, but you should be, in a way. I think it's better to be there than not to be there in the moment, that sort of space. Anyways, guys, why don't you allow me call it a wrap? It's been a pleasure. Okay, before we go, Arsenal want me and Saka want to see me. That is the Dikeledi. Hi, Dikeledi. Shishaba. How are you doing? Good to have you in the broadcast. So thank you so much, Dikele, United Road 10, Jake, Mitchell Wainscots, Muhammad Adash, FYBL, Long Way, Soya, and every single one of you that has been part of this morning's broadcast. Allow me to wrap it up here and wish you a wonderful rest of the weekend. Go and enjoy the game for what it is. I hope, regardless of what team you root for, you find the appreciation in the goodness of either team. Let's hope it's not going to be a humiliation for either side. I do not anticipate it's going to be a very high-scoring final like it was last time out. I think it could be marginal, maybe 1-0 or 2-1 in that sort of sense. However, sometimes when you're losing, depending on what a moment of the game that it is, you could sort of lose the courage to keep going, and then before you know it, you concede the third. But I think the scorelines are going to be really, really marginal. Go live after the final. Don't hide. Like I said, I'll be looking to going live after the final. It may not be immediately because I intend to watch the game from out of the comfort of my own space. But whether it's at midnight, whether it's at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., I do not know what time. But the beauty of it is that the game in itself, by 9, will have ended, or slightly beyond, will have ended. So we'll find the courage to do the live, regardless of what happens. I'm going to Arsenal. I'll see Eze and Saka and Rice and Raya. Good luck to you, Dikeledi. Good luck to you. Wish you the very best if that is what you intend on doing. So United Road 10, just keep your notifications on, and when I do come on, you'll be notified that I'm here and we digest it all. Win or lose, I can only pray for the courage. The other day, somebody was asking me, Mo, how did you find the calmness to do the live after Arsenal had won the league title? And I mean, just because I'm beaming with excitement, I also have the acknowledgement that I interact with multiple audiences, those that may have been happy for Arsenal or otherwise, and I'm just not going to rub it in. It's not just in my emoji. So I had to compose myself and do it. They said they thought I was going to do it while standing. Jesus Christ. How would that be? Anyway, maybe one of these days I should do a live while standing. Anyways, jokes aside, but we'll see what we can do. I can only hope that we get to do things that things perfectly align. Obviously, you can imagine if I come here and Arsenal have won in the aftermath of the final, as opposed to me coming when they have lost. Of course, the modes will vary, but I can only hope that I still find the courage either way to do it. And if they do win, I hope I'm not overrun by joy that I forget to do the live. Either way, I hope we'll be here. Anyways, guys, stay blessed for now and have a wonderful weekend ahead. Until next time, bye-bye for now.